All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into some pretty influential figures. I mean, these are the folks who really shaped early Christianity, right? We're talking about the Church
The
Fathers.
Church Fathers, yeah.
But we're doing it a little differently this time. We've got some insights from an Aramaic scholar, a tour guide, actually, Andre Mubarak from Jerusalem.
Okay.
He teaches about the Aramaic roots of the Christian faith. I mean, that's his thing, and he knows his stuff,
Oh, interesting.
And you can find more from him on his website, www.twinsbiblicalacademy.com.
Got it.
Yeah. So I've always been kind of fascinated by the Church Fathers, but looking at it through like an Aramaic lens, it's like, whoa, it adds a whole new layer.
Yeah, it's like it takes them from just being like names in a history book to like real people passing on living, breathing faith.
Exactly. So before we get too deep into all the names and dates and stuff, can we just, like, what exactly do we even mean by Church Fathers? It's not just like dads, right?
No, not at all. When we say Church Fathers, we're talking about a whole bunch of different people. Theologians, bishops, scholars, you name it. Mostly from the first few centuries AD, like the first 500 years or so.
Okay, so like the early church, right?
Exactly. They had a huge impact on like how Christianity developed.
So how do historians usually kind of organize all these figures? Like, is there a system?
Yeah, there's a few ways. One way is to look at them, chronologically, like on a timeline. You start with the Apostolic Fathers, the ones who were like actually connected to the apostles themselves.
Wow, so these are people who actually knew like Jesus's followers.
Yeah, or at least their direct disciples. I mean, can you imagine reading letters from folks who hung out with the people who knew Jesus firsthand? It's mind-blowing.
So who are some of the big names in this group?
Well, you got Ignatius of Antioch. He was big on Christian unity, like really stressed that. And the Eucharist, too, super important to him.
So even back then, they were already like figuring out all that stuff, huh?
Oh, yeah. Authority, doctrine, the whole nine yards.
Okay, and who else?
Oh, and Polycarp of Smyrna. He was a student of John the Apostle. And then there's this document, the edtā. It's like basically an early church handbook, like how to do church, right?
A how-to guide. That's amazing.
Sometimes it's called the Teaching of the 12 Apostles, but we're not totally sure about that.
Huh, interesting.
It's like a snapshot of the very, very early days of Christianity.
Wow. Okay, so what comes after the Apostolic Fathers on this timeline?
All right, so next up you've got the Ante-Nicene Fathers.
Ante-Nicene?
Yeah, that means they were active before a big event, the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD.
Okay, so they're like laying the groundwork.
Exactly. This is a time when they were hashing out a lot of the core Christian beliefs.
Oh, so they were like figuring things out before everything got officially set in stone.
Exactly. Lots of debates, lots of different ideas floating around.
So who are some of the key players in this period?
Okay, so one of the big ones is Tertullian. He was like wrestling with the whole Trinity thing. He actually came up with the word Trinity, Trinitas, in Latin.
Oh, wow. So he's the one who gave it a name.
Yep. His work was super influential in how we understand the Trinity today, which is, not a simple idea.
No, not at all.
And then there's Origen of Alexandria. He's known for his allegorical interpretation of the Bible.
Allegorical, so like finding the deeper meaning behind the stories.
Exactly. And then there's Irenaeus of Lyons. He was all about defending the traditional teachings of the apostles.
So he was like, stick to the original message, huh?
Yeah, he saw other teachings popping up that he thought were like straight up heresy, so he was fighting against that.
So basically, they're all setting the stage for what would become official church doctrine, right?
You got it. And that leads us to the next group, the Nicene and post-Nicene Fathers.
All right, so these are the folks who were active during and after that big council, right?
Exactly. The Council of Nicaea, that was a game changer.
Yeah, I remember learning about that in like history class.
Yeah, it was a major turning point. That's where they officially addressed the Arian controversy.
Okay, and what was that all about? Refresh my memory.
It was a huge debate about the nature of Christ. Like, was he fully divine or was he, something else?
Got it.
And one of the key figures in all of this was Athanasius of Alexandria.
Okay, so he was like, Team Jesus is fully divine.
Absolutely. He was a fierce defender of what we call Nicene orthodoxy, which is the belief that Christ is fully God.
So his arguments basically shaped how Christians see Jesus even today.
Yep, pretty influential guy.
Who else is important in this period?
Well, you've got the Cappadocian Fathers, a trio of brilliant theologians, Basil the Great, Gregory of Nyssa, and Gregory of Nazianzus.
Okay, so they were big on the Trinity, right?
Oh, yeah, major contributions there. And also to monasticism, like the whole idea of withdrawing from the world to focus on spiritual things. And then there's John Chrysostom. He was a powerful preacher, known for his super eloquent sermons. They called him golden-mouthed.
Wow, that's a pretty cool nickname.
He was like the rock star preacher of his day.
So far, we've been talking about like the Latin-speaking West, right? But you mentioned that Andre Mubarak, our Aramaic expert, he's focused on the East. So were there church fathers in the East who wrote in Aramaic?
Absolutely. The Eastern Church was like its own vibrant thing with its own traditions. And yeah, they had church fathers writing in Aramaic, especially in Syriac, which was like a dialect of Aramaic.
Okay, so like parallel traditions happening at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. So, for example, you've got Ephrem the Syrian, a poet and theologian, known for his beautiful hymns, really moving stuff.
So like the Eastern equivalent of someone like Augustine or something.
Kind of, yeah. Although their styles were pretty different, but in terms of impact, yeah, definitely.
Okay, who was?
There's also Isaac of Nineveh. He was a mystic, very focused on the inner life, a bit of an ascetic, too.
So like withdrawing from the world to focus on spiritual things, kind of like those monks we talked about.
Exactly, and his writings are still read today, not just by Christians, but also by some Sufis.
Wow, so he crossed like religious boundaries.
Yeah, his work had a real universal appeal. And then, of course, you can't forget Jacob of Sorab.
Okay, what's he known for?
Metrical homilies, basically sermons in verse. They're theologically deep, but they're also, like, really poetic and beautiful to listen to.
So he's like the rapper of the church fathers, huh?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. He definitely had a way with words.
So this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because Andre, our Aramaic guy, he says that the Aramaic word for father, it's more than just like a biological father. It's deeper than that.
Yeah, for sure. The word in Aramaic is abba, and it has this sense of like intimacy, respect, like it's more about spiritual mentorship than just like being a dad.
Right, so it's about passing on wisdom and guidance.
Exactly, and that idea carries over into the Aramaic term for fathers, which is abāhāṭā. It's like this lineage of wisdom being passed down through the generations.
So when Aramaic-speaking Christians talked about the church fathers, they weren't just talking about like dudes with authority. They were talking about people who were carrying on this like living tradition of faith.
Precisely. It was about the transmission of something real, something that couldn't just be written down in a book.
And there's that Aramaic phrase, right? The one Andre mentions.
Oh yeah, abāhāṭā, father of the faith. It's beautiful. It really gets to the heart of what the church fathers were all about.
It's not just about like dogma or rules. It's about passing on a way of life, a way of seeing the world, a way of experiencing God.
Yeah, and they did that in so many different ways, through their writings, their teachings, their example. I mean, just look at the diversity we've talked about today, from poets to preachers, mystics to defenders of orthodoxy.
It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. So what do you think, what's the most significant thing about the church fathers? Like, what's their legacy, really?
For me, it's that they remind us that Christianity has always been like this dynamic thing. It's not static. It's not frozen in time.
Right, it's always evolving.
Exactly. And the church fathers, they were wrestling with these big questions about faith, about God, about Jesus. And through their struggles, their debates, their disagreements even, they helped shape the Christianity we know today.
And what about that Aramaic perspective we talked about? Like, how does that change our view of the church fathers?
It brings it back to the human level. It reminds us that they weren't just concerned with like establishing doctrines and rules. They were concerned with people.
With passing on something real, something that could transform lives.
Exactly. And they understood that the best way to do that wasn't just through words, but through a living, breathing relationship with God.
That's a powerful lesson, especially today when everything feels so, I don't know, so uncertain.
For sure. I think we can learn a lot from the church fathers about how to live out our faith in a world that's constantly changing, how to hold on to what's essential without becoming rigid or dogmatic.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, that wisdom that they were so dedicated to passing on.
Exactly.
So if the church fathers were so focused on passing down this spiritual wisdom, not just doctrines, what do you think? What parts of their teachings are like the most relevant to us today? What can we learn from them that goes beyond like just the historical facts? I mean, it's something to think about, right? As we continue our own journeys of faith and understanding,
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely worth pondering.
All right, folks, that's it for our deep dive today. Andre Mubarak from Jerusalem. And you can find more from him on his website, www.twinsbiblicalacademy.com.